Hi, I'm Chaplain Tyler, and you're watching this video on You Got This with Tyler. In these series of videos, I'm going to be sharing different stories of some of the most impactful and potentially life-changing events that I've experienced in my time as a chaplain. Some of them are catastrophically horrible. Some of them are amazing stories of joy, courage, and hope. And all of them impacted me profoundly. The particular situation that I'm going to talk with you about today is one that happened relatively early in my chaplain career. I was still very young. I think I had turned 30 by this time. I was in the middle of a residency in chaplaincy in a trauma hospital. And one day I got a call to come to a unit that was not my unit, and they asked for me by name. And I thought that's a bit unusual, so and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, so I went to the chaplain who is responsible for that unit and asked her if it would be okay if I answered this particular call. She said, okay, no problem. And so I went up, and the nurses in this particular unit told me that they had a young man who had cystic fibrosis. And for any of you who know what that disease is, it is a horrible disease. And it is full of amazing pain, and the prognosis, there is no prognosis for cure. It is just how long can you last. And this young man was 19. And he had just been informed by the doctors that he had 2 weeks left to live. And that was it. Medical science had done everything they could at this point, and there was nothing more to do. Well, the nurses had been working with him for years, and they were very upset. His family was upset. But the reason the nurses called me is because they said that this young man, when he received his prognosis, went, okay. As if he wasn't worried or scared or upset that this was now happening. And the nurses didn't believe him. They just didn't believe him. Everybody else was traumatized by this, and he was okay? Didn't make any sense. And the reason they called me specifically is because I was, by far, the youngest chaplain at this hospital. And they thought that I would be able to relate to this young man maybe a little bit better, and maybe he could trust me with his feelings enough that I could do some good and help him transition and get ready for his impending death. Oh my goodness. So I thought, well, okay, I do what I can. So I went to go see the young man. He was a First Nations young man, and there was something about him that I can't describe. It was not an innocence as much as it is a brightness of spirit. I don't know how else to put it. People liked him. People were drawn to him. I could see why so many people were upset that his time of living was coming to an end. So when I went in, there was a young woman there with him, and so I said, okay, well, no worries, I just thought I'd introduce myself. And he goes, no, it's okay. She's just going to go for a little bit, and why don't we chat? I'm like, okay. So, after, as I said, I introduced myself, and we talked for a bit. And as we talked, I realized that this is a young man who would really appreciate straight up honesty. So I said to him, people are worried about you. I've been told that you now have been given 2 weeks left to live, and that's a pretty harsh thing to have to face, especially as a 19-year-old. How are you doing with this really? And he looked at me and he said, "In all honesty, I'm ready for this. I have been preparing for this since I was 12 years old, when I was brought into the hospital and not supposed to recover. I faced the end of my existence at that time. Anything else that I have has been a gift. And I am ready. I am good with the end of my life. I'm good with the man upstairs. I'm good with my family. I'm good with my friends. And the only thing that I need is a friend, because no one else is good with this." That really hit home for me and challenged me, because here I was coming to offer support. And this young man knew that he, in essence, he was the support for everybody else. And he was saying to me that he knew he had to be strong and good for them and for their sake. And what he needed from me was someone who he could laugh with, someone who could just be there with him, someone who could help him be that strong person. So I did. I got to hear more and more of the stories of who he was, and I just laughed with him and joked with him over the next, he ended up having 3 weeks. He told me things about how he lived, and one of the best stories is that the day before he and I met, he was going down the elevator with his IV and the pole sitting right there, and in his hospital gown, and here was an attractive young woman in the elevator going down the elevator with him. And he knew he only had a couple of weeks to live. But he wanted to live that in a way where he could be with people, and he didn't want to be alone. So he just risked. He didn't care. He just risked. He said to the young lady, "Hey, how you doing? What's up? Why are you here?" She told him that she had a relative in the hospital, and he said, "Well, I'm heading down to go get a chocolate yogurt, iced yogurt. Why don't you come down and tell me about it?" And over the course of that, he said to her exactly what was happening, and he said, "I'm really appreciating who you are, your care and your concern. I think you're a beautiful young woman. Why don't we date for the time that I have left?" And she was drawn to him with his honesty and with his directness, and said, "Yeah, let's do that." So here, he got himself a girlfriend out of nowhere, in a hospital gown with the back gaping open and an IV pole, and he was about to die, and he just was open and honest and direct. There were other examples of who he was and what occurred. He would tell me about how he worked with his family. He would tell me about his friends. The pain was starting to get really bad at one point, and so he asked his doctor for further pain medications, and there really wasn't anything. And then he said to the doctor, because at that time, this is almost a quarter century ago now, medicinal marijuana was not of the same quality as the street marijuana at the time, and he knew that the street marijuana would help. So he asked his doctor if he could go get some, and the doctor said, "I'm not your keeper. If you can leave the hospital and go and get something, then I don't know about it, because I don't know what you're talking about." And so he went out and got the street marijuana and was able to dull the pain for a while doing that. I ended up just being with him and just being a good friend, helping the staff, helping the family. At the end of 3 weeks, he died horribly. He died I don't know how much of the details I should say. But he died, unfortunately, with his family outside of his door, and he had slumped on the door and they weren't able to open it, and so they were screaming trying to get to him. That traumatized the family and traumatized the staff even more than they had been. The staff weren't able to function, and the hospital administration got a formal trauma debriefer to come and to be there with the staff and to work them through a diffusing, and the person who facilitated could not identify with the feelings that were happening for the staff. They didn't understand the depth of this, that this wasn't just in the moment a traumatizing issue, a traumatizing situation. This was a situation that encapsulated several years of care, and the specific nature of this young man made it extremely difficult for the staff to move on. They just couldn't. And they wouldn't. And I don't blame them. So that debriefing did not work well. And so they asked me to do my own with them for those that were not doing well with this. And so I did as much research on trauma debriefing as I possibly could, and came and did that debriefing or diffusing with them. And because I could empathize, and because I had been, at least to some degree, connected with it and had gone through it with them, we cried together and we laughed together, and we were able to move forward. And I believe the staff were able to say goodbye. I was able to, the family asked me to come in to do a reading at his funeral, which I did. And the reading that I did encapsulated the life that he lived. And I read the lyrics for a song that he reminded me of. And if you're interested, please look it up. It is an amazing song that talks about how we learn to live as if every moment is our last. And there's a joy in that and a freedom in that. And it takes our anxiety away. It is a great song. And the song is called The Next 5 Minutes by an artist called Stephen Curtis Chaplain. And I invite you to look at it and to read it and maybe listen to it. That song, anytime I hear that song, I now think about this young man all the time. And it reminds me to live in this moment. It reminds me that it's not about taking risks or withholding myself. He didn't withhold himself. He knew what his worth was, what his value was, and more importantly, he knew what his function was with his family, with his friends, and he lived that. He lived knowing the next 5 minutes might be his last 5 minutes. And so he lived in a way that challenged me greatly. And I hope that this gives you a little bit of encouragement to let go a lot of the anxiety about tomorrow that we have. Some of us live in a time and in a place where we live under the tyranny of tomorrow. And we worry about what tomorrow is going to bring all the time. I'm guilty of it. I'm sure some of you are guilty of it. And this young man challenged that in me. And he also challenged me to live an open life, meaning open of spirit, to welcome and to be there for other people in a way that maybe I hadn't been able to do before. This young man was loved beyond measure. He is missed beyond measure. And if I, almost 24, 25 years later, if I can be anything and have become anything like this young man, I'm doing okay. So, for you, may you be encouraged. May this have been a story of joy, of courage. Yes, it was traumatic. Yes, there were some horribly difficult moments. But I tried to be what he needed me to be, which was a friend. And by being his friend, I hope that it helped him to be what he needed to be for his family, for his friends as he transitioned from this life to whatever it is that comes next. In the meantime, I share this with you, and I see you out there. I believe in you, and you got this. If that young man had it, you can have it too. Have a blessed rest of your day, and I look forward to our next meeting. Take care.